Imagine sitting on a plane with your child, knowing that one small bag holds the medicine that keeps him alive. Now, picture a flight attendant grabbing that bag and throwing it in the trash. That's exactly what happened to one father and his young son. Within minutes, the boy's life was at risk, and the father had no choice but to raise his voice in front of the entire plane. What happened next shocked every passenger on board. "Please don't touch that. It's important." Those words left Michael's lips softly but firmly as he watched the flight attendant glance toward the small zippered pouch on the tray in front of him. That pouch wasn't just a bag. It was his son's lifeline. Inside were carefully packed vials, inhalers, and prescribed pills that his 9-year-old son Caleb depended on to manage his serious medical condition. Without them, even a minor health scare could quickly turn into a life-threatening emergency. For Michael, traveling with Caleb was never a simple task. While other parents worried about snacks and keeping their kids entertained, Michael's focus was survival. Before leaving home, he double-checked every prescription, labeled every container, and carried doctor's notes in case anyone asked questions. He had done everything right, and as he settled into his seat on the plane, he finally allowed himself to exhale. The hard part, boarding with a child and luggage, was behind him. Now, it was just a matter of making it safely to their destination. Caleb sat quietly beside him, his small hands busy coloring in a superhero book. His legs dangled above the floor, not quite reaching the ground. Every now and then, he looked up at his dad with a shy smile, and Michael would pat his shoulder reassuringly. To anyone else, it looked like an ordinary father and son enjoying a peaceful flight. But Michael knew better. He never let his guard down. Not when Caleb's health was so fragile. The calm atmosphere shifted the moment the flight attendant appeared at their row. She had the polished smile of someone trained to project authority, but behind that smile was a sternness that made Michael uneasy. Her eyes went straight to the pouch on the tray table. "Sir, that bag needs to be stowed," she said flatly. Michael quickly explained, "It's my son's medication. It has to stay close. If anything happens, I need it immediately." But instead of listening, the attendant frowned as if she didn't quite believe him. Passengers in nearby rows began to glance over, sensing something was off. The hum of the cabin seemed to grow quieter. Michael felt his chest tighten. He had a bad feeling, one that told him this flight was about to be anything but ordinary. Michael barely had time to react. 1 second, the pouch was right in front of him. The next, the flight attendant's hand snatched it up with brisk authority. "Ma'am, stop. That's my son's medication," Michael shouted, his voice rising above the hum of the engines. But she didn't stop. With a dismissive glance, she dropped the pouch straight into the trash bag she was carrying. The sound of it hitting the bottom was like a punch to Michael's chest. He froze, his heart hammering. For a moment, he couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. Caleb's eyes filled with tears. His small voice cracked as he cried out, "Dad, my medicine." She threw it away. His panic was immediate and raw, the kind of fear only a child who understands the fragility of his own health could feel. Michael leapt up, reaching toward the trash bag. "Get back now." His words cut through the cabin, sharp and desperate. But the flight attendant stepped back, holding the bag out of reach. "Sir, airline rules are rules," she snapped coldly. "Liquids and pills can't be out here. They need to be stowed away." Passengers sitting nearby gasped, some covering their mouths in disbelief. A murmur of voices spread through the rows. People had seen everything. This wasn't some minor misunderstanding. A child's life-saving medication had just been thrown away in the middle of flight. Michael's throat tightened as he looked at Caleb, whose breathing was already shallow from fear. He knew the stress alone could trigger an episode. And here they were, thousands of feet above the ground, cut off from doctors, pharmacies, or any backup plan. The realization hit him hard. His son's safety was in the hands of people who refused to listen. Michael's pulse pounded in his ears. He could feel every eye on him, but in that moment, he didn't care about embarrassment, reputation, or rules. The only thing that mattered was Caleb, who was clutching his chest, his face pale, his voice trembling. "Dad, I don't feel good." That was all it took for Michael's fear to turn into fire. He stood tall, towering over the flight attendant, and his voice thundered through the cabin. "Listen to me. That bag you threw away isn't some snack or drink. It's my son's medication. Without it, he could collapse right here on this plane. If anything happens to him, every single person here will know it's because of you." The cabin went still. Conversation stopped. Drinks froze halfway to lips. Even the hum of the engines seemed quieter. The flight attendant stiffened, clearly shaken by the sudden intensity in Michael's tone, but she still held her ground. Caleb whimpered again, tugging on his dad's sleeve. Michael's eyes softened as he looked at his boy, then sharpened like steel as he turned back to the attendant. "You don't have to believe me, but I promise you this. If my son suffers because of your actions, the consequences will be on your shoulders." Passengers began whispering. A woman a few rows ahead stood up and spoke clearly. "He's right. That child needs his medicine. You can't just throw it away." Another passenger nodded firmly, adding, "Give it back. Now." Within moments, murmurs spread like wildfire. Phones came out, cameras pointed forward, and the atmosphere shifted. Michael wasn't alone anymore. The crowd had seen the truth, and their presence added weight to his words. And in that instant, the flight attendant realized she was standing against not just one desperate father, but the entire plane. The pressure inside the cabin felt heavier than the altitude itself. Dozens of passengers were now locked in on the confrontation, their eyes darting between Michael and the flight attendant. Some had already raised their phones, recording every second of what was unfolding. The attendant's confident demeanor began to crack as the whispers turned into louder voices of disapproval. "You think a pouch of medicine is dangerous?" Michael's voice cut through the tension. "Do you know what's dangerous? My son going into shock because you refuse to listen." His words weren't just loud. They carried a force that made even the passengers in the back lean forward. The flight attendant hesitated, clutching the trash bag as if holding onto it would prove her authority. But authority was slipping away fast. A man across the aisle stood up, shaking his head. "Ma'am, this isn't right. That boy needs his medicine. Give back." The chorus of agreement grew. More passengers chimed in, their voices overlapping. "He's just a kid. What if that were your child? Hand it over." The once silent cabin now pulsed with collective anger. The flight attendant's face turned red. With every second, her position became weaker. Finally, under the unyielding weight of stares, phones, and Michael's unwavering presence, she gave in. She dug into the trash bag, rummaging until she pulled out the small pouch. Her hand shook slightly as she placed it back on the tray, carelessly, almost resentfully. Michael immediately grabbed it, unzipping it quickly. He checked each vial, each pill case, making sure nothing was missing or damaged. Caleb let out a shaky breath, relief washing over his young face as he clutched his father's arm tightly. The passengers weren't clapping. They weren't cheering. They were glaring, every pair of eyes now fixed on the attendant who had crossed a line no one could ignore. Michael's voice, calm but razor-sharp, cut through the silence. "You owe my son an apology." The flight attendant froze at Michael's words. Her jaw tightened, and for a moment, it seemed like she might apologize. But instead, she muttered something under her breath, turned sharply, and walked down the aisle without looking back. The silence she left behind was louder than any apology could have been. Passengers shifted in their seats, shaking their heads, their eyes following her retreat. A woman leaned across the aisle and whispered to Michael, "You did the right thing. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." Another man handed Caleb a bottle of water and said gently, "Stay strong, kiddo. You're lucky to have a dad like him." Michael gave a small nod of thanks, though his hands were still trembling as he zipped the pouch closed. He slipped it back into his backpack and placed it firmly at his feet, vowing never to let it leave his reach again. Caleb leaned against him, eyes half closed but calmer now, knowing the danger had passed. A few minutes later, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to apologize for the earlier misunderstanding. Safety and passenger well-being are always our top priorities." His words sounded rehearsed, but everyone knew exactly what incident he was referring to. The rest of the flight passed in tense silence. The attendant never returned to their row, and Michael didn't care to see her again. His focus stayed on Caleb, who held his father's hand tightly until the wheels touched down. As they exited the plane, several passengers stopped to offer their support. "File a complaint," one urged. "We'll back you up," another nodded. "People need to hear about this." Michael squeezed his son's shoulder and whispered, "No one will ever take your safety lightly again." Caleb smiled faintly. He believed him, and that's how one father's voice protected his son when no one else would. It's a reminder that sometimes speaking up isn't just about being heard. It's about saving a life. What do you think about the way this father handled the situation? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more powerful stories like this one, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss the next story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.